Federalism. Federalism is a mechanism for effective governance of a union to reconcile unity with municipality, centralization with decentralization, and nationalism with localism. In a democracy, the political spectrum allows for the vertical and horizontal sharing of power. Under the horizontal power sharing, power is shared among different organs of government, such as the executive, legislature, and judiciary. Whereas the vertical power sharing calls for the distribution of power among different levels of the government, such as central, state, and local governments. Let's understand this form of power sharing, most commonly referred to as federalism. What is federalism? The concept of federal state has evolved over a period of time. The political experiments have proved that there are some issues which could be handled best by the national governments, whereas other issues of local interest can be handled well by the regional governments. Derived from the Latin word fidus, the term federation means treaty or an agreement. A federation may come into being either as a result of centripetal or centrifugal forces. In other words, they may be called as coming together federations or holding together federations. The coming together federations include the USA, Switzerland, and Australia, where independent sovereign units join together, retaining their identity for the purpose of safeguarding their security. The holding together federations include India, Spain, and Belgium, where a bigger unit decides to share its power with the constituent states, though unequally. The key features of a federation are dual government, distribution of powers between the center and the states, written constitution, independent judiciary. Federalism in India, a panacea. India became independent in 1947. Achievement of independence in India witnessed terrible racial acrimony due to the partition of the country. Horrible atrocities of unknown variety were perpetrated in the name of religion, while the members of Constituent Assembly were deliberating upon the provisions of the Constitution. The new Constitution came into effect on January 26, 1950, establishing the Federal Union of India. With the multi-religious, multi-caste, multilingual, multi-regional and multicultural society background, federal structures seem to be the only way to establish democracy. What makes India a federal country? The Constitution of India in Article 1 came to provide, India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. The framers of the Indian Constitution were aware of the historical background of India and the special needs of India, and they framed the Constitution according to the changing needs of the dynamic society. India is a typical federation, and the functions and finances between the Union and states have been constitutionally demarcated. The population in the Federation is spread over 28 states and 7 union territories, 2 with their own elected governments. There are separate executive, legislative, and judicial arms of government constituted at both central and state levels. The 7th schedule to the Constitution specifies the legislative domains of the central and state governments in terms of union, state and concurrent lists. The subject that do not fall under any of these three lists are being legislated by the Union government. They are known as the residuary subjects. The Indian Federation, being the holding together federation, gives special status to the state of J&K. It has its own constitution, and many provisions of the Indian Constitution are not applicable prior to the approval of State Assembly. The Constitution also provides for a rigid procedure of amending the power-sharing arrangement between the two units of the Federation. The centralization inherent in constitutional assignment was further strengthened by the adoption of a strong and independent judiciary to resolve the conflicts between the centre and the state governments. It provides to appoint a finance commission every 5 years to review the finances of the centre and the states and recommend devolution of taxes and grant an aid for the following 5 years. How is federalism practiced in India? Federalism is seen as a mechanism to deal with national, ethnic, religious, social and geographic diversity. The major practices that have strengthened federalism in India are setting up of linguistic states, emergence of the language policy, restructuring of center-state relations, decentralization of power, the state reorganization on the basis of language became a focal point almost immediately after independence as an important aspect in national consolidation and integration. Language is closely related to culture and therefore to the customs of people. The language policy in the Indian Federation is the second check. Our constitution has not given the status of national language to any one language. There are 21 other languages recognized as scheduled languages by the constitution besides Hindi. Each state also has its own official language. Restructuring of powers between the centre and states is another way in which federalism has been strengthened in practice. Rise of a number of regional parties and establishment of coalition governments led to a new culture of power sharing and respect for the autonomy of the state governments. The federal power sharing in India needed another tier of government that could work below state governments to solve problems and issues of residing citizens that can be best solved at local level. This formed the basis decentralization of power. The constitution was amended in the year 1992 for the better implementation of the third tier of democracy. It provided for regular elections in local government bodies, provision of reservation in elected bodies for SC, ST and OBCs, reservation for women, creation of State Election Commission to conduct panchayat and municipal elections, provision of sharing of powers between state government and local government. Also called local government in villages, it resulted in the formation of panchayats, while municipalities were set up in urban areas of town and city in all the states. Both panchayats and municipalities were directly under the control of state governments. With the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments in 1993, over 250,000 local government units have been created in urban and rural areas to provide an enabling environment for decentralized provision of public services.